All right. Thank you, Katie, for the introduction. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm excited. Yes, I know a lot of folks in the community now. I feel like I'm always popping up on y'all screens, but hopefully y'all haven't got tired of me yet. So I am Jessica, and yes, I do work with Girl Development. I have been with the organization since pretty much the beginning of my tech journey. And, today I really wanted to provide an opportunity to highlight one of the things that I think is talked about a lot, but it is kind of understated how important it can be to jump into it early on and how beneficial it can be for you in the long term. And that topic is going to be getting GitHub. So, I believe that when we first get started in tech, you probably have heard about Git or GitHub, especially nowadays. It's very common to hear about it, even if you are early in your coding journey. However, it can be lot to like learn and kind of onboard to. However, for me, I actually started out learning about Git and GitHub when I took my very first web development workshop. And although at the time it was something that was kind of optional, wasn't super necessary for me to learn it for the material that I was learning. I Over the years, I have been so grateful that I was exposed to it so early on, and that I began learning and actually using it in GitHub early on. So, without further ado, today what I want to do is cover some of the very important aspects of using it in GitHub. This won't be like a full tutorial necessarily. We don't really have time to cover it. However, I do materials like this with Girl Develop It all the time. But what I want to do is kind of go more at a high level. What is the difference between Git and GitHub? And then what are some of the specific features that you can highlight within GitHub that will allow you to showcase your technical abilities, as well as showcase the progression that you're making in your career. So I do have the chat open. There is going to be a little bit of a delay when it comes to me being able to see some of the things that you all are commenting on in the chat. But if you do have questions, please just throw them in the chat as soon as they come to mind, because again, it's going to be a slight delay for me, but that way I'll be able to see them and possibly address them semi in real time. But yeah, so I'm starting out here on the landing page of my GitHub profile because um, I want to just kind of showcase how I'm using GitHub as well. So overall, um, again, for me, I started using pretty much when I took my first web development class. So I actually can see my entire history as a developer on GitHub, which is, I mean, I'm like a nostalgia type of person. So I'm like keepsakes and mementos and things like that. So it's been kind of surreal to me to realize the only way I can tell you for sure that I've been coding for like 9 years straight essentially is because I literally can look back on GitHub and see when I created my account, when I was taking my early classes. So over the years, there has been a lot of feature changes, and some of the newer features I think really highlight the social aspects of GitHub, using it more to highlight who you are as a software engineer, and not just having it basically be a place that just hosts code. So this is something that I even do for my live streams. So I currently am live streaming my machine learning journey, right? So I'm getting into machine learning, and I want people to know what the behind the scenes look like. That's what I typically do with my live streams. And so nowadays, whenever I start my live stream, I start right here on this landing page. So it's kind of funny because I go back and forth with the whole personal website and how I should like actually invest in that and everything. But one thing that always remains true no matter what I'm doing with my website is that it's very easy for me to highlight, high level things that I want people to know for engineer, and also like about my involvement in the community through my GitHub profile. And so even when I open up my live streams now, I always just start right here on this landing page. And I'm going to talk about the different features that we have available. But on GitHub, I am Jessica, Jeseekia. So if you do want to follow me on GitHub or anything like that, you can. And what I was doing for y'all, since I was having that part of the talk earlier, I was actually updating some of the things I have here on my profile, just so that if you want to get in touch in other ways, there's a little bit more of an easier way to see that. But yeah, so we're going to talk about a bunch of those different things, but I just kind of wanted to show you how my profile is looking right now. You can see I do have different areas of the profile filled out. I do highlight different particular projects that I'm working on. And then I'm particularly working on my contribution graph right now, which is basically kind of like, a visual indication of how much coding I'm doing. And as someone that has taught a lot over the years, I have so many gaps that's one of the ways that I'm encouraging myself. And I remember early on, this was an area that I was particularly interested in, seeing the progression. But you can see I literally started my GitHub back in 2014. So it's kind of weird because it feels like it was just maybe 2, 3 years ago. As much more than 2 or 3 years ago. And I can see everything I've pretty much done so far, as long as it wasn't in a private repository. So I know people have different experiences with Git and GitHub. One thing that I want to start out with, so you have two different elements of this, right? So there is Git, right? Git, Git, Git. Git is a version control tool. So with Git, um, we're able to easily basically uh, have some type of versioning, collaboration features, rollback features. It's basically allowing us to take snapshots of our code base at any given point in time and saving those in a central location, but also having it saved. Well, it's really more distributed. I shouldn't actually say central, but you have a centralized repository, which is what we call our remote repository. Usually GitHub is our remote repository. And then everyone who is a part of the project typically also has a full copy of the project. So Git as a version control tool is definitely something that most people learn about early on and start to use early on. Then on the other hand, you have GitHub. So GitHub is an actual, online platform where you can host your code for your projects. So you have your Git-based projects, and you don't really have to use GitHub. There's other tools, and also you can just use GitHub on your computer without ever connecting to GitHub. But uh, GitHub itself is expanded. So not only is it where we host our repositories, but they have all these different um, features that allows you to make sure that this is a landing page, because as you all probably just recently went to the technical resume workshop, there is certain things that is important for you to highlight. And for me, I usually think about having my actual resume document, because I usually have to submit that. And then I have my LinkedIn profile, which is more like a visual of my resume, right, from the professional side, key areas. And then I have my portfolio. And for me, my portfolio is basically GitHub. So you will want to really think about not just hosting your code on GitHub, but making sure that people are able to see who you are and understand what these different repositories are, giving everything context. Okay. So when in the past, I think that I started out with I would have GitHub like as a link on my resume, and I would have like a link to GitHub on my LinkedIn. But I was just expecting people to literally go like straight to a repository, straight to a project that I'm working on, and just look at the actual code that's behind it, right? Okay, I just want them to see what does my code look like. But nowadays, I have tried to actually, I don't know, optimize how this profile works for me. So if you all have any tips on um, how you're using GitHub in that way in the chat, definitely let me know. I see people are dropping their links to GitHub as well. But yeah, so we're all about this, right? So here, let me do one thing really quickly so I don't have to bother y'all on this screen. Okay. So that's kind of the high level. Now, you know, in the tech industry, I think that GitHub itself is pretty much one of the standards when it comes to how companies host their code, and Git being the version control tool that is pretty much preferred. Like, I hesitate to say like blanket statements, but that's pretty much the world that we live in. And it's only intensified over the time that I've been in tech. So one thing that I want to talk about though is that when I was first starting out, it was not really necessary per se for me to start with getting GitHub. I was still learning HTML and CSS. Like, I was at the very, very beginning of my journey. But I had a workshop that I took, and the instructor actually was teaching us how to use Git and GitHub alongside the material that we were covering. And to be honest, like, most of the people that were in my workshop, it was an evening thing, working full time, and it was just it was something that they were trying out, but they weren't really pursuing. Um, they weren't pursuing like a long-term tech career. And so a lot of people not only didn't really complete the actual activities and labs that we were doing, but a lot of people didn't even bother like with Git. And that's okay. Like, I totally understand. But for me, I was very intent on doing as much as I could. So anything that was covered in the class, I pretty much made sure that I pretty much made sure that I was putting the time in. And so in the beginning, I was learning how to use Git on my own projects. And I was just, every time I was doing little small labs and things, I was actually committing those to getting used to the process of working with repositories. So there's a lot of levels to, your Git knowledge. And I think one of the most important things was that I started out when it was just me, and I could work, and learn things at my own pace and in my own realm of comfort, I guess you could say. Um, and I really appreciated that, because when I got to a team, I was so much more comfortable with what I had done so far, that I was prepared. Like, I felt mentally prepared at that time to take on, a little bit more of the stress of interacting with other people, to take on new skills as far as some of the collaboration tools that you're just never going to use with Git if you're doing it by yourself. Um, and so it's been an incremental change over the years. But yeah, in the beginning, I started out just pushing and pulling my code, and feeling comfortable with it. And you can even see, like, literally back in 2014, I joined GitHub. So, oh wow, it's like coming up in August. It'll be like, what, 9 years? So, um, I started out like literally every little workshop. I'm just going to click on this one, and because I was a TA for girl development when I was first starting out, right? I said that. So when I was working on one of the workshops, I actually followed along. This is literally a web page that I built alongside one of the workshops for girl development back in 2015. So um, I don't think you can tell, like, if you look here, I wasn't really like utilizing a lot of things. So usually when you come to GitHub, one of the first things you see is if you go to a project, you're going to see the project page, right? So you have the code, and that's important, but there's so many other aspects of this page that you can really highlight. So namely, when you're coming to a project page, you typically have this readme file. It's a markdown file. That's what the .md stands for. And you have this file that automatically displays on the page as long as it is in your repository right here at the root of the directory. But this is like no context for anybody, right? Like it just says it's a project page. It does say it's an HTML and CSS workshop, but it has no information. So if I was trying to showcase this to an employer, I'm literally just assuming they're going to go in here and actually look at all my files and look at my code and things. And this is a very small project, but imagine a much bigger project, right? So already one of the main aspects that you can start to incorporate is when you are building out your code and you have your repositories on GitHub, go into detail in these different readmes. Show what the project is about. Give a description of it. Talk about the features you're trying to build. Give more context so that when someone lands here, you can even point them in a particular direction and highlight things. You can say, hey, in this case, I was learning how to do CSS animations, and here are some of the new features that I built. So if it's more of your personal projects, especially for the portfolio side of things you want to cover, I highly recommend. That's a good place to start if you already have your page set up. Let's see. I want to keep up with the chat, so I will take moments to jump in or out. Someone asked about Git Bash versus a GUI. I can talk about that. Okay, here, let me do this. I'm going to start a Q&A. Okay, so if you want a question asked answered in particular, go ahead and look at the Q&A tab. You should be able to submit a question. That way those can be highlighted for me. But yeah, so you do have repositories, right? But you want to start out with the idea that no matter whatever repository it is, you're going to have some type of a README. A README is a markdown file. Markdown is essentially just if you it's like the opposite of HTML. HTML is like called a markup language. Markdown is kind of supposed to be a lot more simple and pared down than markup. So this is really basic. Like it just has a title. It doesn't even have like a heading or anything on it. But in markdown files, you can do things like use the pound for different headings. I can make this a heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, right? Similar to how we have in HTML. Things can be paragraphs automatically, but I can also do things like create lists. And when I save these elements, they're going to actually be rendered with some type of formatting around them. So that's like the basics of Markdown. And if you want to know more about Markdown with GitHub, you can look up in the documentation. They have a GitHub Markdown, or you can literally just Google GitHub Markdown and you'll find a page that actually tells you more about the specifics of how to format the Markdown files. Anything that you could any basic things that you could do in the HTML markup, you can pretty much do like headings, links, lists. But then there's some other things that you can do as well. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time there, but that's the first place that I would start. So I think that was my first evolution, right? So let's come to the homepage. Now, there's 2 key features I want y'all to know about in GitHub in particular. 2. This is a new feature. The README that goes on to your profile. This is a new feature, and I highly recommend everybody taking advantage of this because before we didn't have this option. All we had when you came to the homepage was we had like you can have your name and your username. You can have a like literally tweet size, not even tweet size honestly, because I think this is shorter than I think new tweets are longer than than this now, but you have like the old school like tweet style description, which you can actually mention organizations in here, like GitHub organizations in here. But it's really, really, really brief. It's only so much that you can do. And so you can also see your organizations that you're involved with. You can add your socials and things like that. So that's going to be your basic profile. That's the first thing that you set up for sure. Now, in addition to that, you typically had your pins, and then you had just your contribution graph. That's all on your main page. But this is a new feature. So the README is an opportunity really like to flesh out this profile and tell people all about you. And so it's actually a special repository. So I'm not going to show how to set those up today, but I have resources and links, and I'm actually going to drop a link to, um, did I put it somewhere? Let me see if I copied it. Yeah. If you want to get like any updates from me, I created like a little newsletter landing page for y'all literally earlier today. I'm gonna pin it for now. But if you want to get any updates or anything like that, just join that, and I will send y'all all kinds of resources and things like that. But yeah, so I will be going into more details about like the technical side of how to set these up. If that's something that you need help with, I'm going to be posting some videos about that, and I'll also be doing Get in GitHub. We'll be hosting Get in GitHub this summer as well through Girl Develop It. So if you want to get any of those updates, just join just join the MailChimp, and I'll get that information to you all. So I just wanted to give you one centralized way to be able to connect with me and get more information. But yeah, this is a special repository. So let me show you how this works. So under your profile, this is one of two special repositories that I know of. The first special repository you have is you will go to GitHub. You will create a new repository, but your new repository will just be the same exact name as whatever your username is, right? This is not going to work if you use any other name. So whatever your owner account says, whatever your actual GitHub username is right here, they need to be exactly the same. So if you name your repository the same name as your username, then the README, you can have a README.md file in that repository. And this is a marked special file where this markdown file belongs to your profile. And honestly, here, I'll show y'all what it looks like when it's in edit form. This is actually, I didn't really come up with the categories on my own. Like when you first create it, they give you a comment here. Here, I'll just see if I can make it a little bit bigger. But yeah, when you first create the file, they give you a comment that actually shows you like, well, maybe it wasn't commented. I think I commented this out, but they do give you a section that kind of shows you like, here's how you can add some stuff to your profile. So they start out with, I'm currently working on, I'm currently learning, I'm looking to collaborate on, I'm looking to help with, or I'm looking for help with, ask me about, how to reach me, pronouns, and a fun fact. So I'm slowly kind of changing this up, but I did start out with these exact same bullets on mine. And so for me, I've been developing out like literally earlier today. If you look at this repository for me, like as far as the commit history, you can see that I actually I added the Discord link for y'all. Like I added some new features here. And yeah, I mean, I will be honest, like as much as I always harp on having your your landing page and building out your profile that way, I feel like I'm always in the middle of editing that whenever I'm doing a talk or something like that. And so that's why I was just like, when I saw this README was a thing, that just changed the game for me, because again, it was something where I don't even have to get on my computer and use the command line or use any Git tools. All I had to do was come in here and edit this in the browser, and I actually added new information in the browser, so that way I can make a quick change and it just be done, and it's easy to share. So again, this is the README for your personal profile. So that is going to be hosted at it's going to be a repository that is specifically named after your username. So I'm going to check because I do see a couple blips under Q&A. Okay, coming from bootcamp, my GitHub is now full of all the small lectures and labs. Is there any way you recommend to wrangle them? Okay. Show an example of project descriptions. Okay. Advice on contributing to open source. And then are there any specific integrations or tools? Okay. So let's see. Let's go to I keep clicking on I'm so used to my like clicking on my name that every time I get to this repository, I click on the wrong one, but don't mind me. I'm just a creature of a habit. Okay, so let's look at what's the one I was just working on? Because honestly, I didn't really do too much of it, but I do try to oh, you know what we could do? Let's go see my boot camp. Let's go see my boot camp repository. Let's see what I did for my boot camp repository. So that would have been back in, again, I could just go back in time, and it's just so valuable. This is our boot camp project. So our formatting, oh, you know what? It has changed over the years. I thought I was crazy. The formatting, I think, has changed a little bit over the years because you used to be able to put the symbols right up against this and it would show up. But I think that changed. But anywho, this was our bootcamp project. Again, not the best, but what we wanted to do was highlight what the goal was of our actual project itself. So we have our about. Usually you start with a title, you have your about. We had a background for ours, which is just to let you know, like, this is our 2-week project from our Java bootcamp, and we created this in March of 2016. And it tells when we actually did our project demo as well. Then we have our development team, which is links to all the GitHub profiles for each person who participated. So I was the one who hosted our project on, my GitHub profile, but then my other teammates, their profiles are linked here as well. And then we talked about the technologies that were used, right? So what are the technologies that you're using on the project? Because there's probably a reason why you're directing someone here. And then other things that you could add here, we could add the features that are, we really should have the features that is included in our project. So listing out the features, and then you can also list out future improvements or, future iterations. So especially with like a bootcamp project, right? Sometimes you don't really get as far as you would like to go, but you can still share your thought process by saying, these are if we had more time, these are things we will work on. Or if on continuing to work on your project, then highlighting what are those future features that you are looking to implement. And again, this is more on the personal project side of things. And then what I found helpful is in the past, I always worried if I should put my different labs and things in different repositories. I typically go for the mindset that if it's a standalone project, it should have its own repository. But sometimes you have little small labs here and there. I think you can do it however you want. If you want to have a individual project for each lab, that probably makes sense after a while because usually those are standalone. But if you have like small, tiny examples that can pretty much be implemented in one page, you can do that. And the reason why I say, you kind of have a little bit more flexibility there is because nowadays, one thing that you can do is it used to kind of be like, just come see, I have 194 repositories. And like, what does that even mean? Like, where should somebody start? Well, um, regardless of how you choose to section out your labs and things, you can pin items to your homepage. So if you're not using pins right now, I highly recommend it. And so think about it from that perspective. For me, a repository is typically a standalone project. That's usually what a repository the understanding of how we use repositories. And with that being said, I think about how I would pin things. So the things that when you come to my profile, these are like one, I think you can have between 1 and 6 pins. So these are 1 to 6 items that I think are important. These are the repositories I want you to know I'm working on. And something that's really awesome is that this no longer has to be just the repositories that I'm personally working on. So you can see that like Crawl Walk Run is mine, 100 Days of Code is mine. Fast AI Practical Deep Learning for coders, that's mine. But these other 3 repositories, these are repositories that I contribute to, but that are owned by Girl Develop It. So that's one nice thing, because if you are working on an open source project, or maybe you're working on a project that's hosted by another person, even my teammates that were in the boot camp with me, they could pin they would be able to pin the repository that they were a part of onto their profile. So thinking about your pins and making sure that you have your pins set up, I think that's a crucial aspect to your homepage. Let me see, what other questions were we looking at? I'll come to the contributing to open source towards the end. And then tools. So I'm pretty basic in my tooling, because when I first started out, I was just doing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, like all vanilla languages. React was not a thing. Angular was really not even a thing. It was around, but it wasn't as popular when I first got started. So um I usually have the terminal, because I'm on a Mac, so I have the terminal, and that's I have a text editor. I used to use Atom before that got sunset. Now I have VS Code, because that's kind of like my best replacement for Atom. But it's that I keep that basic setup, honestly. You can use other tools, like you can use GUI or GUI, graphical user interface. You can use the GitHub. I mean Git. Yeah, it's a Git GUI that you can use. I don't prefer that. There's a couple reasons. Some things can be useful in the GUI, like if you have to do more complicated merges and things like that. It could be very helpful to have the UI. However, when it comes to learning, I found that the GUI abstracts away so many things that it's hard to actually grasp the underlying concepts of the version control tool itself, right? So, and I found that that was even true when I was using an IDE versus actually compiling code from the command line, right? Like it's great to have tools, but it is important to understand that a lot of times you might be losing the context on the underlying concepts. So I never really used the GUI at all. And that's just, I don't know, I'm just kind of used to it. I always interact with Git through the command line for the most part. However, over the years, I have gotten more into using the desktop or the web browser to make changes to different types of projects and things, especially something like my README, where it's like, am I about to literally go on my computer and do all that work just to change this? No, I can literally just change it in the browser. So I actually will use the browser a lot to make updates to certain parts of the project that are easy to update. Otherwise, I use the terminal, or if I'm on Windows, I use Git Bash. That was one of the questions. I tend to use Git Bash on Windows, just because the commands that I would use are pretty much the same as the commands I would use on my Mac. So I don't have to, know like Windows specific terminal commands. So those are the main tools that I use. Now I do use VS Code, and I can bring Visual Studio Code up, just because um honestly, I don't really install a lot of extensions on VS Code. And that's just because when I was using Atom, like Atom was basically VS Code without all the extensions. And then you could pick whichever extensions you wanted to have. with that text editor. So I never really used a lot of plugins back then, so I don't use too many of them now. But here and there, I will add to my plugins or extensions, however they call it on this one. But one extension that I think actually got picked up automatically and kind of I got prompted for it was there is a extension for where is it? There's a Git functionality built in to VS Code. So that's pretty much the main thing that I use when it comes to looking at Git. And so what that does is it kind of gives me some visual indicators of what's going on in my project, the current status of my actual project itself. So like this is literally a project I just I'm trying to ingest data from a Twitch chat and feed it into a database because I want to use that data in order to train a sentiment analysis model for our Twitch chat. And so some things that Visual Studio Code can do are just give me like a visual indicator of what's going on, right? So if something is grayed out in the UI, that means that is something that's inside of my Git ignore file. That's something that Git is not paying attention to. So I have a visual indication of that. If something is white, is pretty much good. But if I was to make a new file, now my new file shows up as green. So this is a visual indication to me that this is a file that Git does not have any tracking on at all. So that's how I would know, okay, that's a file that I probably need to actually add it to, my Git tracking. And then if a file was changed in some way, then it would turn orange. So I see green lines here in the UI to show me that those are new. But if I save the file, now you can see the file shows as orange in the title and in the Explorer bar, right? So those visual indicators are super, super helpful. But I always go back to running the Git status. It's Git status all day long, right? For me. Um, and getting used to reading these different messages, which messages and which prompts are brought up during different phases of your process with Git. uh I always do that, but it is nice when the IDE actually shows you some hints. And then one last tool that I use that's Git related is instead of like my traditional terminal, I use ZSH, Z shell. I always call it Z shell, but it's also called ZSH. It's a project that allows you to customize the output of your terminal. So it shows here inside of Visual Studio Code, but it does translate over to there, but it does show here inside of my traditional terminal on Mac. And so what happened is I basically have different customizations. Most of my stuff is specific to Git. Honestly, that's the main thing I care about. They have a plugin that you can use, and you can see if I this is my folder that has all my repositories in it. If I go into a file or if I go into a folder that is a Git repository, I'm going to get more information, right? So I can list here. I'm still just looking at files. But then if I go into the chat fields, which is the project we were just looking at in VS Code, yes. Now, automatically by entering into this folder, I see some visuals of what's going on, right? I see that this is a Git project and it says main, so that's showing me which branch I'm on just by default. Okay, so that's just nice because for one, if for some reason I think my project is a repository but it is not a Git repository, I will immediately know, because if it's not showing any type of indication of Git, then that means my project is not does not have Git for one reason or another, and that's just because that's the way I set it up. So those are some of the tools that I use. This can also show when I'm in the process of still merging or doing some other high level things. So it pretty much gives me the state of what I'm doing. Like if I was to say git checkout dash b um, feature branch, now you can see if even if I didn't, even if I clear my terminal, I can still see that I'm not on my main branch, I'm on a different branch. So that again is ZSH or Z shell, and that is that's the part of the Git plugin that you can enable for that. And then there's another really important repository. This is one of the main ones. This one's been around for a while, but I wanted you all to see. I wanted you all to see that. And then somebody asked about earning badges. It's so funny because I have achievements, but I never knew like I most of the time I didn't earn these on purpose. I think there probably is a way that we can actually know more about the achievements that are available. I don't know. But I have achievements. This YOLO I got this YOLO one recently. Apparently I merged the PR without a review. So that's how I got the YOLO one. It was my own project though. And it was a sample actually. You see, it's called My First Repo. This was I was teaching for Git. I think I was actually this was in March when we were doing our Git and GitHub stuff. So I was doing a demo for it. So that's how I got the YOLO badge. And then the Pull Shark badge, I got this one for opening pull requests that have been merged. So apparently I have 3 PRs that have been merged. I should have like probably way more, but yeah. So I don't know if anybody knows where the source is for how we earn badges, but they just started popping up on my profile and I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. I'm here for it. And then I got this one just because there was a bunch of repositories, I guess, that went to the program, and I had contributed to a couple of those repositories. So I think that's a very specific badge that you can get. But yeah, let me see if I want to talk about advice for contributing to open source, and I want to talk about the most important feature that I really think is um, underutilized, and that's going to be your domain name that GitHub gives you. So I don't know how many of y'all realize this, but GitHub has something called GitHub Pages, and GitHub Pages will automatically host um, basically your static websites. Anything that's pretty much front end only for the most part. There's a few exceptions, but if you have any front end projects that does not require like too much like code compilation or anything like that, you can actually use GitHub Pages to host it. However, in addition to that, there is a very special page repository that allows you to have your username.github.io. Um, so this is again, this is basic because we were just doing a demo back in March, and I keep teaching this over and over again. So I show how to actually deploy, build and deploy this repository so that this will work properly. But this is the second special repository. So if you create a repository called your username dot github.io, right? So the first repository we did, it was just our username. This repository has to be your username.github.io. So if you have a repository named like this, then you can use GitHub Pages, and GitHub Pages will deploy this repository. But again, this one goes to that specific domain. So all your other repositories, if you deploy them, they'll go to kind of like a branch um, of this domain. But this is like a really easy way to get like a personal profile set up for yourself, where you can just give people the domain name and then they can go visit it. And then you can also add a custom domain if you would like. So like for me, I have metadevgirl.com. So I could actually go into my settings and I could enable my where is it? Do, do, do. I could enable my custom domain inside of the settings. Is it gonna show up on this page? I think it's gonna show under pages. So in your settings, the GitHub pages move to the tab that's just called pages. So if you want to see more information about like GitHub pages, which branch is it using to host your page and things like that, and then what is the URL, then you can see it easily from here. But yeah, so in addition to seeing that, my site is live here at this URL, I can also add a custom domain. That will require me to do a little bit of the configuration with the domain, but it's pretty much straightforward and Googleable if you do anything with hosting, like with a domain registrar. So, yes, all things that I'm happy to teach and share. I usually teach those materials, but um, today I just wanted to give you that high level overview so that way you kind of know what to expect and even what to look into. So the key takeaways, I think that's most important when it comes to um, just getting GitHub overall is even if you are early on, you can start out with just using Git and GitHub for your personal projects, your education projects, or different, maybe if you have a personal project that you want to start in particular, you can do that. um, Definitely create your repository, your username based repository, right? So that's the repository that just has the same name as your username. Create your readme.md file inside of there and go ahead and start building this out and let people know. You can put links to things, right? So I have linked to my YouTube, my Twitch. I have the Discord invitation link here. I have my email address and things like that. So you can highlight whatever information you want people to see. Create your pins. So pin those projects that are most important, right? I can customize mine. So I have some of these projects up here that are a little bit more education based, but I can swap something out for any of the other projects I'm working on. Like yesterday, I started the chat fields, right? I want to add chat fields. I can only have 6. So now is a time where maybe I will swap out this one that is an educational one. That's like basically where I'm putting different notebooks for my machine learning projects. And I'll put chat fields because that's an actual tool that I'm working on building out. And now that I'm beyond some of the demo of the repository, here, I'll show y'all really quickly what I'm swapping it for so you can understand my thought process. Here, this is to the question of like the education side of things. I have a question here where you can see it says it's examples and projects I built while following Fast.ai's materials. So I'm following the Fast.ai course as a part of my 100 Days of Code journey. And I wanted to have a repository where instead of making something new for every single project, I just have a Python notebook for every chapter of the book. And so nothing crazy going on here. This is just where I save the notebooks right now. So in the beginning of my 100 days of code, like 30, because I'm on day 31. Today's going to be day 31. So at the beginning, all I had was this repository to show like, hey, here's some stuff I'm working on right now. So you can see what I'm learning. But now that I literally actually just built one of my first data ingestion projects, I'm swapping out the follow along material that I had and swapping that out for a practical example of how I'm applying my knowledge. Okay. So you can just evolve these pins over time. And again, I think we're at a point where if you don't have enough room in the things you want to highlight in your pins, then you can also take advantage of the README. So, of course, fill out your profile. If you are a part of other organizations on GitHub, like if it's an open source open organization, or if it's a even a company that you might be associated with, you can usually have those over here, your email address, socials, and stuff like that. And then, of course, your repository for your custom domain. You want to take advantage of that if you're looking for an easy and free way to host a web for yourself. Um, Lastly, I can talk a little bit about open source and how I view getting involved in open source. So back when I was very first starting out as I learned about a project and I learned like, oh, open source is a way that you can get involved with code before you actually get a job. That's kind of how it was like being promoted at the time for me. And so I said, okay, cool. I want to try something. And I contributed to a project called exorcism.io. So exorcism.io is basically a site where you can actually create or learn how to program in different languages. They support a lot of different languages. And so you can do basic, at the time, you could do basic, solve basic problems in a number of different languages. So I think that some of the things that I learned as a part of that journey was, again, like I said, there are certain things you're going to learn on in a collaboration setting with Git that you're not going to have to care about um, when it comes to working on an individual project, right? So I learned how to do things like rebasing and yeah, I learned how to do rebasing because that was the preferred way that they liked to merge their code together. So I didn't even know what a rebase was, and I was walked through that process. And so I think some of the actual tools that you need to learn with Git that is more collaboration based, I recommend kind of like spending some time learning about that. We that will be a part of the Git and GitHub materials that's going to be coming out this summer. Some people actually did that workshop with me back in March, and so we actually walked through that process, right? So there's a number of different workflow things that you want to learn about Git and GitHub, learn about using pull requests and things like that. It's so much more that I could talk about. And then I was gonna say, is there any other? Oh, when you want to contribute to open source, you don't have to start with code. Most of the time, um, there's documentation that needs updating. There's so many specific facets of the project that you can contribute to. That's not exclusive to just giving a code contribution, right? So, if you join the project and you're just trying to get it set up and get onboarded and you're trying to go through the onboarding material for the project, then that's a perfect opportunity for you to realize like, oh wait, there was some gaps in the process, or there was something that has changed in the process recently that's not properly documented, and you can follow along, or you can contribute back, right? You can actually make a pull request to update the documentation, especially when you're onboarding to a project. That's a perfect time to let somebody know if there's a gap in the process. So I'll highlight Project Ricotta for a minute, because this is the most recent open source project that I've been focused on and trying to get into. And so I would say that when you are coming to a new open source project, usually you should, in their README for the project, you should get information, background information about the repository, contributing guidelines, and other things that you need to know. So everybody can do this a little bit differently. But if they don't have everything pretty much spelled out in the README for you, you should be expecting to get directed to some type of location that does host that information for when it comes to a project. And then you can also actually, I usually look for how frequent and recent the changes are to the project. If it's been like 3-4 years since somebody um, contributed or merged a commit, and then you can look in the issues and see like what's open, like what kind of issues do people are people logging. Sometimes this is features, but a lot of times this might be issues that people run into. This is a place where you can find out ways that you can help out on the project. And then in the pull request, if you see a project and it's like they haven't merged a pull request in like 2 years, then it might not be something that you want to like dive into, right? Because it may be likely that you won't actually have your change merged in. It might not be actively being maintained. Um, and then you can also see historically things that have been closed as well. But those are a couple things that you can kind of quickly see at a glance when you land on a page for a project. So I recommend looking into some of those. Um, I appreciate everybody because I feel like I've been talking for an hour straight, and yet we have still managed to run out of time. Not really run out of time, but we are at the end of our time. So I do see. I think I answered all of the questions in the Q&A. I hope I did. Um, I will go ahead and quick put this link to MailChimp. I'm going to put this right in my profile. So I think the best thing is like I'm trying to just give y'all one easy way to connect. So let's go to my profile and I'm going to add it to my README. And that should be quick and easy for me to do. And again, see, this is a perfect reason where I would use the UI of actual GitHub instead of going through literally like having to push it from my computer. Okay. So how to reach me? Join my newsletter. Okay, so here's a link. So this is GitHub Markdown. So if I want to put a URL, basically, I'm going to have square brackets and parentheses. The square brackets is going to say, actually, let's do it here. The square brackets goes around the actual text that you want to show for the link, right? And then the parentheses go around the actual link that you want to navigate people to. So I'll just drop that in. I'm going to do this just in case. And now I can just commit. Adding my newsletter. And I can, if I wanted to create a branch and do a PR, I could do that. Or this is my README. I'm just going to merge it directly in. So now you can see if I come here, I can click on join my newsletter and it'll take y'all here where you can see literally, I just put this up for everybody. So it's nothing super special, but I just want to have a really easy way that anybody can connect. You're also welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn if you would like. I seen some requests coming in, so I will be adding you all shortly. But I really appreciate it. I wish we had more time to talk, but I'm working on a lot of Git and GitHub materials for everyone right now. So we are going to be launching our Git and GitHub class for probably next month. Hopefully Katie Franco doesn't beat me up for saying that. But if you're looking for, more materials like that, similar to what we covered back in March, you can look there. And then I'm also going to be posting some extra resources and like, the tutorials and things onto my YouTube channel as well. So I'll send updates through the newsletter whenever any of those things are released. I also like I said, I live stream every single day for 100 Days of Code right now. And I am on my personal journey into AI, not just from a practitioner perspective, but I'm also planning to go back to school and I'm pursuing research and a PhD in the long term. So this is really like a lifestyle change for me. But right now you can follow me. I live stream on YouTube and Twitch every single day. so you can see what I've been working on. And I'm really putting a lot of effort into YouTube these days. So if you are curious about any like updates and resources, I tend to actually build out I tend to build out the user the landing page for my account, not just with the things that I'm working on, but also with other materials. So here you can see a combined feed of all the different podcasts that I'm hosting right now, and they are kind of listed in the order that makes sense contextually. You can see my 100 Days of Code here, and you can see other talks that are, from other channels that I've been in. I also have recommendations for um, learning AI and ML as far as YouTube. I'm a big YouTube person, so anything I want doesn't get into. And then we also um, I do playlists and kind of structure those out. So this is always a work in progress, but will be released soon. So I look forward to seeing. Feel free to add Discord. If you join Discord, I will see y'all. Welcome everybody in. Were there any that I didn't cover? Please let me know. And if you do add me on LinkedIn, or if you join Discord after the fact, just let me know you came from the GDI talk. I'm hoping that I'm not keeping y'all from Jessica's session. So I want to go ahead and let you all feel free to hop off if you're going to go hop into Jessica's section. She's awesome. But I appreciate everyone for being here. Thank you. Thank you.